The news hit like a thunderclap across the United Kingdom and reverberated around the world within minutes. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, had been removed as patron of the Invictus Games. For many, this seemed almost unimaginable. Harry had not only founded the Games, but had poured his heart, soul, and reputation into them, transforming them from a bold idea into an internationally celebrated event honoring wounded, injured, and sick service personnel. To be stripped of such a role wasn't just a professional demotion. It was, for Harry, a deeply personal affront, a message that shook the very foundation of his connection to the monarchy and to the cause he had championed tirelessly. Within hours of the announcement, whispers of tension, palace politics, and private fury filled the media landscape. Yet the shock didn't end there. Replacing him as patron was none other than Mike Tindall, a figure well regarded in sports and royal circles, but widely seen as Harry's polar opposite. Composed, uncontroversial, and firmly embedded in the structure of the monarchy. For many observers, the choice was symbolic, almost poetic. The bold, independent, and sometimes unpredictable prince replaced by a steady hand, a man who exemplified continuity and loyalty. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For Harry, the reaction was reportedly explosive. Sources close to the Duke described scenes of disbelief and anger that stretched from private quarters within his residence to conversations with aides and confidants. He couldn't believe it, one source told reporters. He felt blindsided. After everything he has done, the decision felt not just unfair, but a personal betrayal. The language surrounding this story quickly shifted from the procedural to the intensely emotional. It was no longer just about patronage, funding, or ceremonial duties. It was about loyalty, recognition, and respect, elements of the royal framework that Harry had long wrestled with in his own relationship to the monarchy. And while the world watched and speculated on the surface, beneath it lay an intricate web of family dynamics, media scrutiny, and institutional decisions that would ripple far beyond the immediate headlines. The Invictus Games, founded by Harry in 2014, had become more than a sporting event. They represented a promise, a mission to honor those who had given their all for their countries yet returned with invisible and visible scars. Harry had often spoken, sometimes emotionally, about the sense of purpose the Games gave him, especially following his military service in Afghanistan. Public appearances were marked by genuine empathy, laughter, and tears. Behind the scenes, Harry worked tirelessly with organizers, athletes, and sponsors, often advocating for improvements in accessibility, mental health resources, and global outreach. To have that platform, that symbol of personal and professional achievement, removed was more than a title stripped away. It was an existential blow to a part of Harry's identity he had cultivated for years. Even as the media frenzy intensified, questions began to mount. Why now? What led the palace and Invictus organizers to make such a bold move at this particular moment? How would this affect Harry's already fraught relationship with the royal family, particularly his father, King Charles III, and brother, Prince William? And perhaps most intriguingly, what did the selection of Mike Tindall as his replacement say about the monarchy's priorities and Harry's standing within it? The story had every element of high drama: betrayal, rivalry, personal ambition, and a backdrop of public service. Analysts began to dissect every word of the official statements, every social media post, every historical precedent, searching for clues to the larger narrative at play. For Harry, the Invictus Games were never simply a ceremonial obligation. They were a mission intertwined with his very sense of purpose. From the earliest moments of planning, he envisioned the Games as a bridge between military service and civilian recognition, a platform where wounded and recovering veterans could reclaim a sense of pride, community, and identity. He had often spoken candidly about the emotional toll of military life and the invisible battles many soldiers faced once they returned home. Every handshake, every medal awarded, every speech delivered on that stage was not just a display of pomp, but an intimate acknowledgement of courage, resilience, and sacrifice. Losing the patronage wasn't merely a bureaucratic shift. It struck at the heart of an endeavor he had nurtured through blood, sweat, and late nights spent negotiating, fundraising, and advocating. The announcement, brief and official, carried a weight far beyond the words themselves. Royal communications had merely stated that Harry would be stepping down from the role and that Mike Tindall would succeed him. But sources insist the decision was far from voluntary. Within hours, insiders described a flurry of communications behind palace walls, with aides scrambling to manage both the Duke's response and the narrative presented to the public. Harry's personal team reportedly felt blindsided by the timing and the lack of forewarning, which only amplified the sense of betrayal. What made the situation even more volatile was the perception of symbolic replacement. Tindall, a former rugby player and Olympic medalist, carried an image of steady reliability and unquestionable loyalty to the royal family. While Harry's energy had always been bold, independent, and at times unconventional, Tindall represented continuity, decorum, and alignment with the expectations of the monarchy. The juxtaposition could not have been more pointed. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Social media platforms exploded with speculation, support, criticism, and memes. Headlines ranged from the empathetic, Prince Harry stripped of patronage, emotional toll on Duke of Sussex, to the speculative, palace politics behind Harry's removal, to outright sensationalism. Pundits and royal commentators debated the implications, framing the event as either a necessary institutional adjustment or a shocking personal slight. Some argued that the decision reflected a broader pattern of the monarchy reclaiming control over high-profile public engagements. Others saw it as an escalation in the ongoing tensions between Harry and senior royals, a visible manifestation of a rift that had been growing for years. Meanwhile, the human side of the story unfolded quietly but intensely. Friends close to Harry spoke of his initial disbelief, describing him as shocked, frustrated, and deeply wounded. "It's more than just losing a title," one confidant explained. "This was something he built from nothing, something that defines a huge part of who he is. To have it taken away feels like a personal attack, not just a professional decision." Those words underscored the personal stakes involved. The removal of patronage was as much about identity and legacy as it was about ceremonial duty. The timing, some analysts noted, was particularly significant. The Invictus Games were scheduled to take place in the coming months, with international attention and media coverage already mounting. Harry had been intimately involved in planning, with every detail, from logistics to athlete participation, having received his personal attention. Being removed at such a critical juncture, so close to the public unveiling of the next games, magnified the embarrassment and the emotional impact. For observers, the move suggested calculated timing rather than a simple administrative reshuffle. Questions abounded. Would Harry publicly challenge the decision? Would he retreat from the games entirely, or seek to create his own parallel platform? And what did this mean for his broader relationship with the monarchy? In the age of instantaneous media, every reaction, statement, or social media post could become amplified, dissected, and judged in real time. The stakes were both personal and public, and the emotional intensity of the situation promised to dominate headlines for weeks, if not months. At this point, we are around 1,100 words into the introduction. The scene is set with tension, emotional stakes, and narrative hooks for the audience. Sources close to the palace offered little clarity beyond the official announcement, leaving much to speculation. Observers wondered whether the decision was part of a broader strategy to consolidate royal influence over high-profile charitable initiatives, or a deliberate signal aimed at curbing Harry's increasingly independent public persona. For years, tensions had simmered beneath the surface. Harry's decision to step back from royal duties, his outspoken interviews, and his international ventures with Meghan Markle had fueled narratives of a prince at odds with tradition. While these activities were framed by some as progressive and modern, they also challenged long-standing expectations of loyalty and discretion. Within this context, the removal of patronage could be seen as both a correction and a warning, a public demonstration of the monarchy's authority, executed in a way that was impossible to ignore. Yet while palace officials may have viewed the move as procedural, the emotional reality for Harry was far more intense. Accounts describe him pacing through private rooms, grappling with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and humiliation. Friends reported that he considered immediate responses, including reaching out to the press or posting statements via social media, yet was acutely aware that any reaction would be scrutinized and potentially magnified. It was not merely the loss of the role itself, but the optics of the situation, being replaced by someone else while his own contributions were publicly minimized, that struck hardest. The story was no longer confined to internal palace corridors. It had become a public drama, unfolding in real time across international media, social feeds, and talk shows. Mike Tindall's appointment added an additional layer of intrigue. Tindall, a former rugby star married to Zara Phillips, Queen Elizabeth II's granddaughter, was known for his calm demeanor, grounded personality, and ability to navigate public life without generating controversy. In contrast to Harry, whose persona often carried intensity, vulnerability, and a willingness to challenge convention, Tindall represented stability, tradition, and alignment with royal expectations. The symbolism was unmistakable, a figure who embodied continuity and loyalty, replacing a prince whose very identity had increasingly been defined by independence and outspoken advocacy. The choice, intentional or not, amplified the sense of personal affront for Harry and heightened public curiosity about the underlying motivations behind the decision. As the day unfolded, social media and news outlets were awash with speculation, analysis, and emotional responses from the public. Royal fans and critics alike debated the implications. Some defended the move as a necessary recalibration for the Games, ensuring leadership by someone deeply integrated within the family structure. Others decried it as a betrayal, an act of emotional and professional sabotage against a prince whose dedication had been unwavering. Viral commentary ranged from sympathetic expressions, "Harry gave his life to this cause," to satirical mockery of the palace's handling of sensitive figures. Each tweet, post, and article contributed to a growing pressure cooker of scrutiny, magnifying the personal stakes for Harry and making the private turmoil increasingly public. Beyond the immediate public and personal reactions, the situation carried long-term implications for Harry's sense of identity and purpose. Patronage of the Invictus Games had been more than a ceremonial role. It was a defining part of his adult life, representing his transition from royal heir to an independent figure with a tangible, positive impact on the lives of others. Removing him from that position was not simply administrative. It was a symbolic erasure of years of work, relationships, and emotional investment. For the first time in a long while, the prince confronted the stark reality of institutional boundaries, family politics, and the limitations of personal influence within the royal hierarchy. As the world watched, one question lingered above all others. How would Harry respond? Would he accept the decision quietly, or would this igniting spark of frustration evolve into a public confrontation? The stakes extended far beyond the Games themselves. They touched on legacy, personal honor, and the intricate balance between public duty and private ambition. For Harry, the unfolding events were more than news. They were a test of resilience, a challenge to self-definition, and an emotionally charged moment that would shape both his personal trajectory and public perception. By the time evening arrived, the atmosphere had grown tense, charged with anticipation and uncertainty. Discussions behind palace doors remained guarded, while social media speculation surged into the night. In living rooms, offices, and cafes across the globe, people debated the implications, dissected the symbolism, and wondered whether this was merely a procedural adjustment or the opening salvo in a much larger saga. For Prince Harry, the removal from the Invictus Games had already become a defining moment, one that would reverberate far beyond the immediate headlines, marking a turning point in his life, his relationship with the monarchy, and his enduring mission to support wounded veterans around the world. At this point, the introduction is fully fleshed out, complete with emotional depth, narrative arc, palace context, personal stakes, public reactions, and the symbolic weight of Mike Tindall's replacement. The word count for the full introduction now sits around 1,850 words, achieving the goal of a gripping beginning, middle, and end. Long before the world witnessed the dramatic events surrounding Prince Harry's removal as patron of the Invictus Games, there was a vision that had been nurtured in the quiet corners of his mind, often away from the glare of cameras and public scrutiny. The genesis of the Games was not a decision made overnight. nor was it a simple reaction to public expectation. It was born out of personal experience, empathy, and a profound understanding of the unique struggles faced by men and women returning from military service. Harry, having spent his own formative years surrounded by the legacy of service, sacrifice, and national duty, understood in a visceral way what it meant to carry invisible wounds alongside visible medals. His military service had taken him to Afghanistan, where he experienced firsthand the harsh realities of combat. Beyond the tactical challenges, Harry observed the psychological impact of warfare on soldiers. The sense of isolation, the difficulty of reintegration into civilian life, and the complex emotional landscape that followed traumatic experiences. He witnessed soldiers returning home with injuries, both visible and invisible, often struggling to find their place in a society that could not fully comprehend the depth of their sacrifice. These observations left a lasting imprint on him, shaping not only his sense of responsibility, but also his perspective on how the monarchy could play a meaningful role in supporting veterans. Upon his return, Harry became increasingly involved in veteran-focused initiatives. Early engagements included supporting existing charities, attending ceremonies, and speaking about mental health awareness. Yet he realized that while these efforts were valuable, there was a gap that no single organization had adequately addressed. A platform that celebrated the abilities, resilience, and competitive spirit of wounded and recovering veterans, rather than focusing solely on their limitations. The idea was radical in its simplicity: create a sports event that would allow veterans to reclaim a sense of identity and pride, to demonstrate that even in the face of physical or psychological trauma, their spirit remained unbroken. The concept evolved into what would become the Invictus Games. The name itself, meaning unconquered in Latin, reflected the philosophy Harry hoped to instill in the participants. No matter the obstacles, no matter the setbacks, the human spirit could endure and triumph. From the earliest planning stages, Harry approached the games with meticulous care, balancing the need for global visibility with the personal, intimate support that participants required. He knew that the games would not succeed merely as a spectacle. They needed to provide tangible benefits, emotional support, and a framework for ongoing engagement with the veterans community. Organizing the first Invictus Games was a monumental task. Harry immersed himself in every aspect, from securing funding to negotiating with international military organizations, from coordinating logistics to crafting a compelling narrative that would attract media attention without overshadowing the athletes themselves. He understood that the Games needed credibility, legitimacy, and sustainability. To achieve this, he leveraged his unique position as a royal, but also as someone who had earned respect through service and authenticity. He reached out to veterans, families, sponsors, and public figures, carefully building a coalition of supporters who shared his vision. The first Games, held in London, were a triumph both emotionally and symbolically. Watching participants compete, push their limits, and support each other inspired Harry in ways that words could barely capture. He spoke openly about the transformative power of sport, not merely as physical competition, but as a tool for healing, empowerment, and community. For many veterans, the Games provided a chance to be seen not as casualties of war, but as athletes, role models, and symbols of resilience. The response from the public and the media was overwhelmingly positive, affirming Harry's belief that the initiative could serve as a lasting legacy. Over the years, the Games expanded, growing in size, prestige, and international reach. Each edition brought new countries, new challenges, and new stories of courage and triumph. Harry became the public face of the event, traveling extensively to support participants, deliver speeches, and engage with stakeholders. Despite the fame, he remained deeply invested in the personal side of the Games, taking time to meet participants individually, hear their stories, and provide mentorship. He understood that the Games' impact extended far beyond the medal ceremonies and opening parades. It was measured in renewed confidence, rekindled hope, and the unspoken bond forged among competitors who had shared the crucible of military service. Yet as the Games grew in prominence, so too did the scrutiny surrounding Harry's involvement. Some critics questioned the level of royal influence in what was ostensibly a humanitarian initiative, while others debated whether the event's focus should shift toward broader charitable objectives. Internally, discussions within the royal household occasionally reflected tension between public expectation, institutional priorities, and Harry's personal vision. However, for Harry, these challenges were secondary to the mission itself. His focus remained unwavering: to honor, support, and celebrate the veterans who had sacrificed so much. The depth of Harry's commitment became especially evident during moments of crisis. On several occasions, athletes faced injuries, setbacks, or personal struggles during the games. However, the very qualities that had made Harry an effective patron, his passion, independence, and willingness to challenge norms, also made his position increasingly delicate. As his public profile expanded through interviews, international advocacy, and personal projects, the optics of control and alignment within the royal family became more complex. The institution, historically cautious and measured in its public engagements, sometimes found Harry's approach unpredictable, even destabilizing. It was in this context that the tension surrounding his eventual removal from the patronage began to take shape, laying the groundwork for a confrontation that would resonate far beyond the boundaries of the games themselves. Harry's personal relationships with the athletes played a pivotal role in defining the spirit of the games. He did not treat his involvement as ceremonial. He treated it as personal. Athletes have recounted moments when Harry would sit quietly with them before competitions, listen intently to their struggles, or share insights drawn from his own experiences. These connections were not fleeting gestures. They were acts of empathy that forged trust and reinforced the transformative power of the games. Veterans often described Harry's presence as a source of validation, a reminder that their sacrifices were recognized not only by the nation but also by someone who had walked, in his own way, a parallel path of responsibility, pressure, and public scrutiny. As the games grew, they evolved into a spectacle of international significance. Countries from across the globe sent their best, wounded, and recovering veterans to compete in adaptive sports ranging from wheelchair basketball to swimming, track and field, and even sitting volleyball. Each event was designed to challenge participants physically while fostering camaraderie and mutual respect. Media coverage became intense, with networks broadcasting stories of perseverance, triumph, and the human spirit overcoming adversity. Harry, often front and center, used these platforms not for self-promotion but to highlight the athletes' accomplishments, ensuring that their stories, rather than his own, remained the focal point. Yet the visibility and popularity of the games also introduced an unavoidable layer of complexity. Harry's increasing celebrity status, fueled by both his royal lineage and his independent projects, sometimes clashed with the expectations of the monarchy. The royal family, steeped in tradition and cautious in its public relations, occasionally struggled to reconcile the dual realities of Harry's personal initiatives and the collective image of the institution. Internally, this friction was not openly acknowledged, but its effects were subtle, manifesting in meetings, advisories, and strategic suggestions aimed at curbing potential missteps. Harry, aware of the delicate balance, often navigated these waters with care, seeking to protect the integrity of the games while maintaining his independence and authenticity. Over time, the games became more than a competition. They became a movement that inspired other organizations to explore innovative ways to support wounded veterans. Harry's approach, focusing on empowerment, visibility, and international cooperation, set a new standard. He emphasized the importance of storytelling, using media and personal appearances to create narratives that highlighted resilience rather than victimhood. This strategy amplified awareness, attracted sponsorship, and encouraged other nations to invest in veteran welfare in ways that were previously unprecedented. The Invictus Games, under Harry's stewardship, became a benchmark for humanitarian engagement that combined celebrity influence with deep social impact. However, Harry's success also intensified the scrutiny surrounding his position. While the games were widely celebrated, some within traditionalist circles questioned the extent of his autonomy and the potential consequences of a high-profile royal exercising influence outside conventional boundaries. The very qualities that made Harry effective, his willingness to challenge norms, his proactive engagement, and his visibility on the international stage, also rendered him vulnerable to criticism and institutional friction. These tensions, while often subtle, foreshadowed the eventual decision to reassign his patronage, framing it not merely as a logistical change, but as a reflection of deeper considerations regarding control, image, and hierarchy. The narrative of Harry's journey with the Invictus Games is incomplete without understanding the emotional impact of the events on him personally. Each iteration of the Games reinforced his commitment, but also deepened his emotional investment. He celebrated victories alongside the athletes, mourned setbacks with them, and cultivated a sense of family within the Games community. The weight of responsibility was immense, but Harry embraced it, recognizing that his role was both symbolic and practical. It was a living testament to his dedication to service, empathy, and leadership, forming an inseparable part of his identity that extended beyond titles, public appearances, and media coverage. Despite the achievements and the global admiration, Harry was acutely aware that the Games were also a stage for personal and institutional tension. He understood that the visibility of his work could be perceived as both a strength and a challenge to traditional royal norms. Each decision he made, each public appearance, and each media interaction carried the potential to inspire or to provoke. The delicate balance required constant vigilance, diplomacy, and self-awareness. Harry's approach combined passion with pragmatism, empathy with strategic thinking, and visibility with discretion. It was a unique fusion that had propelled the Invictus Games to international prominence, but also set the stage for conflict when expectations diverged. As we consider the trajectory of Harry's involvement, it becomes clear that the removal of his patronage was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of dedication, achievement, scrutiny, and tension. The Games were a symbol of his mission to empower and support veterans, but they were also a flashpoint in the broader narrative of Harry's evolving relationship with the royal family, public perception, and institutional boundaries. The decision to replace him with Mike Tindall, therefore, was far more than administrative. It was laden with emotional, symbolic, and practical implications that reverberated through the palace, the public, and Harry himself. The morning the announcement broke, the world awoke to a headline that sent shockwaves through both the media and the corridors of power. Prince Harry had been removed as patron of the Invictus Games, replaced by Mike Tindall. For many, the news was as astonishing as it was perplexing. Harry had been the driving force behind the Games from its inception, a figure intimately tied to its mission, and the public face of an initiative that had grown into a global phenomenon. To see his name abruptly replaced triggered a cascade of questions, speculation, and, inevitably, controversy. The palace issued a formal statement, carefully worded yet precise, emphasizing continuity and the importance of the Games while signaling a shift in leadership. The language was measured, noting Mike Tindall's experience with sports and philanthropy, portraying him as a capable successor ready to uphold the values and integrity of the event. The announcement struck a delicate balance between diplomacy and decisiveness, aiming to convey stability while addressing the reality of the change. Behind the polished phrasing, however, the implications were far more complicated. Social media erupted almost instantly. Fans of Harry and the Invictus Games expressed disbelief, outrage, and disappointment. Veteran communities, who had come to associate Harry with empowerment and unwavering support, voiced concerns that the change might disrupt the personal connections and sense of mentorship that had been cultivated over years. Hashtags circulated rapidly, comments flooded news outlets, and the story dominated trending topics across multiple platforms. It was clear that the removal of Harry as patron was more than a personnel change. It was a story that touched hearts, egos, and national pride simultaneously. Reactions among the royal commentators and media insiders were equally intense. Analysts speculated about the reasons behind the move, pointing to both public and private pressures. Some argued it was a strategic decision aimed at limiting Harry's influence in public initiatives after his increasingly independent ventures had drawn scrutiny. Others suggested that the palace sought to restore traditional oversight and ensure that high-profile events maintained a sense of institutional alignment. Behind closed doors, the conversation likely involved complex considerations of public image, internal dynamics, and the balancing act between tradition and innovation. For Harry himself, the announcement was a blow both personal and symbolic. Those close to him reported a mix of frustration, disbelief, and anger. The Games had not merely been a charitable initiative. They had been a deeply personal mission, a reflection of his own experiences, passions, and empathy for veterans. To have the patronage stripped away publicly and replaced without prior consultation or negotiation represented a profound challenge to his sense of autonomy and purpose. The emotional impact was immediate, as Harry had to reconcile his dedication to the cause with the realities of institutional control. Inside the palace, the announcement was orchestrated with precision. Advisors briefed media outlets, coordinated messaging, and monitored public response. Mike Tindall's introduction as the new patron was carefully timed to project continuity and competence. Tindall, known for his athletic achievements and charitable engagement, was portrayed as a natural fit, someone capable of maintaining the Games' momentum while representing a figure aligned with the institution's values. Yet, even with careful planning, the optics were difficult to manage. Harry's removal was widely interpreted as a personal rebuke, sparking intense debate about loyalty, independence, and the role of younger royals in shaping their own legacies. The immediate fallout extended beyond social media and public commentary. International partners, sponsors, and veteran organizations were forced to respond quickly, addressing concerns about the Games' future. Some expressed support for Tindall, emphasizing the importance of stability and continuity. Others quietly acknowledged the loss of Harry's unique engagement, recognizing that the event's soul had been intertwined with his dedication, charisma, and personal investment. This delicate balancing act between reassurance and acknowledgement underscored the complexity of the situation, revealing just how intertwined Harry's personal presence had become with the Games' identity. Veterans themselves were among the most vocal critics. Many had formed deep connections with Harry over the years, sharing stories of struggle, perseverance, and triumph. Letters, interviews, and social media posts began circulating, conveying disappointment and concern that a change in leadership might affect the personal mentorship and visibility that Harry had provided. For these communities, the Games were more than a sporting event. They were a lifeline, a source of validation, and a platform for recognition. The perceived loss of Harry's guidance created uncertainty and sparked discussions about the long-term impact on participants' morale and engagement. Media outlets seized on the drama, publishing detailed analyses, historical context, and speculative narratives. Headlines highlighted not just the removal itself, but the potential personal and institutional tensions underlying the decision. Commentators debated whether this move signaled broader constraints on Harry's initiatives, whether it reflected generational divides within the monarchy, or whether it was an isolated decision driven by the palace's desire for control. The intensity of coverage underscored the story's resonance, reflecting not only public interest in Harry as an individual, but also broader questions about power, influence, and institutional authority in the modern royal family. The public reaction also illuminated deeper societal expectations. Harry had become a symbol of independence, empathy, and activism within the royal context, and the removal from his role challenged perceptions of fairness, loyalty, and respect for personal initiative. Opinion pieces and editorial commentary ranged from condemnation to cautious understanding, with many emphasizing the tension between tradition and change. For supporters, the decision appeared punitive, undermining years of service and personal investment. For others, it was framed as a necessary step to maintain institutional cohesion and ensure the Games' sustainability beyond any single individual. Harry's response, when it came, was measured yet pointed. Through close contacts, statements, and interviews, he conveyed disappointment without compromising his dignity. He acknowledged the importance of the Games and the value of the participants, reaffirming his commitment to their welfare even as his official role had been rescinded. This duality, asserting both personal integrity and concern for the community, reflected his understanding of the delicate balance between emotional authenticity and public responsibility. His message resonated widely, reinforcing the perception that Harry's involvement was about far more than ceremonial duties. It was about genuine connection, empathy, and advocacy. At this point, we are approximately 1,250 words into Section 2. The next portion will continue by detailing the ripple effects across the royal family, political implications, media controversies, and the personal emotional fallout for Harry and close allies, ultimately building toward the escalating tension that sets the stage for the next section. The ripple effects of the announcement extended far beyond social media and public commentary. Within the palace, reactions were a mixture of strategy and calculation. Advisors convened behind closed doors, analyzing potential fallout and crafting talking points to manage both public perception and internal dynamics. The decision to replace Harry with Mike Tindall was not made lightly. It reflected long-standing tensions and a desire to ensure the games remained aligned with the monarchy's broader image while preserving operational continuity. Every detail of the announcement, from wording to timing to media outreach, was meticulously considered, reflecting the high stakes involved in controlling a story that had the potential to dominate headlines globally. Even beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace, the news resonated politically. Politicians, commentators, and veteran advocates weighed in, drawing connections between Harry's removal and broader questions about the monarchy's evolving role in society. Some argued that the move demonstrated the institution's rigidity and unwillingness to accommodate independent initiatives, even when they achieved international acclaim. Others suggested it underscored the challenges of balancing personal passion with public responsibility, noting that Harry's approach, while well-intentioned, sometimes blurred the lines between personal advocacy and institutional oversight. The discourse was complex, with opinions spanning admiration for Harry's dedication to criticism of his public approach and media strategy. Among Harry's inner circle, the emotional impact was profound. Friends, advisors, and longtime allies recognized that the decision cut deeply, not merely in professional terms, but in a personal sense. The Invictus Games had been a mission closely tied to his identity, reflecting his empathy for wounded veterans, his desire to contribute meaningfully, and his commitment to causes that mattered to him. To have that role stripped away publicly felt like both a rebuke and a challenge to his sense of autonomy, magnifying the personal stakes and intensifying the emotional resonance of the announcement. Conversations within his circle revolved around strategy, media messaging, and the need to maintain dignity while asserting the significance of his past contributions. Media outlets quickly picked up on the emotional dimension. Interviews with veterans, former athletes, and supporters highlighted the personal connections Harry had forged over the years. Stories recounted moments of genuine interaction, sharing meals, engaging in private conversations about mental health, and attending to the smallest details to ensure participants felt recognized and valued. These anecdotes painted a portrait of a patron deeply invested in the well-being of the athletes, whose presence had gone far beyond ceremonial obligations. For many, the removal was not merely an administrative shift, it was the loss of a champion whose impact was tangible, personal, and transformative. The choice of Mike Tindall as the new patron added an additional layer of scrutiny. While Tindall was respected for his athletic achievements and charitable work, comparisons were inevitable. Analysts, commentators, and the public debated whether he could match the level of personal engagement and advocacy that Harry had demonstrated. Questions arose. Would he bring the same empathy? Could he maintain the strong personal bonds that had defined Harry's tenure? Would his approach preserve the game's distinctive culture, or would institutional priorities dominate, altering the spirit of the initiative? These debates highlighted not only the symbolic importance of the patron role, but also the real-world implications of leadership style and personal investment in a community of vulnerable participants. Harry's own communications were closely observed. In statements to media outlets, he emphasized that the athletes remained the priority, reiterating his commitment to their welfare and success. This response, while carefully measured, reflected both a sense of responsibility and a subtle assertion of moral authority. He underscored that while official titles and roles could be reassigned, the relationships, trust, and ongoing support he had cultivated could not be easily replaced. In doing so, Harry framed the narrative as one not of defeat, but of enduring dedication, signaling to both supporters and critics that his influence extended beyond formal recognition. Within public discourse, narratives quickly diverged along partisan and ideological lines. Some commentators framed the decision as a necessary step to reinforce institutional oversight, maintain operational consistency, and ensure that the Games remained apolitical. Others depicted it as a punitive measure, a symbol of the monarchy's discomfort with a royal who wielded influence independently and publicly. Editorials highlighted tension between tradition and innovation, obedience and autonomy, and the expectations of duty versus the imperatives of personal passion. Social media conversations amplified these debates, giving voice to a global audience invested in both Harry's trajectory and the broader symbolic stakes of the event. The removal of Harry from the patron role also prompted logistical challenges. Event organizers, sponsors, and international partners needed reassurance that the Games would continue uninterrupted. Communications were adjusted, scheduling reviewed, and contingency plans implemented to ensure a smooth transition, while Tindall's credentials provided credibility. By the end of the first week, the narrative had crystallized into a story that combined human drama, institutional tension, and societal reflection. Media outlets emphasized the emotional weight, veteran communities underscored the personal loss, and royal commentators dissected the strategic reasoning behind the move. Social media remained abuzz, with supporters rallying, critics analyzing, and casual observers absorbing a story that had far-reaching implications for perceptions of monarchy, authority, and individual agency. Harry, for his part, navigated this turbulent landscape with careful communication, focusing attention on the Games' mission while managing his own public image. In hindsight, the announcement marked a turning point not only for the Invictus Games, but for Harry's evolving relationship with both the public and the royal institution. It was a decision that tested loyalties, highlighted competing priorities, and underscored the delicate balance between personal initiative and organizational oversight. For the athletes, the Games, and the broader global community, it was a moment of uncertainty, reflection, and recalibration, one that would reverberate for years to come. And for Harry, it represented both a challenge and an opportunity, a test of resilience, character, and the enduring power of commitment to causes greater than oneself. Section 2 is now fully completed, with over 2,050 words covering the announcement, immediate reactions, public and media fallout, internal palace dynamics, and emotional impact on Harry and stakeholders. The next section will focus on Section 3. Mike Tindall steps in, expectations and comparisons, detailing Tindall's introduction, public perception, challenges he faced, and contrasts with Harry's tenure. This section will be at least 2,000 words. The announcement that Mike Tindall would replace Prince Harry as the patron of the Invictus Games was met with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and cautious optimism. For many, Tindall represented a new era, an individual outside the immediate royal line, known primarily for his athletic prowess, public charisma, and prior charitable endeavors. Unlike Harry, whose role as patron had intertwined personal passion with royal expectation, Tindall approached the position with a different lens, one shaped by his experience as a professional athlete, team leader, and media personality. This contrast immediately sparked discussion. Could Tindall match the dedication, personal engagement, and global influence that Harry had cultivated over nearly a decade? From the outset, it was clear that Tindall faced a daunting challenge. The Invictus Games were not merely a sporting event. They were a mission deeply personal to Harry, rooted in empathy, lived experience, and an understanding of veterans' physical and psychological struggles. Athletes, staff, and supporters had come to associate Harry with the Games' ethos, a sense of connection, advocacy, and heartfelt commitment. In assuming the patron role, Tindall would have to navigate these expectations, proving that his leadership could honor the culture Harry had nurtured while establishing his own credibility. The pressure was immense, magnified by intense media scrutiny and social media commentary, which often compared every gesture, speech, or appearance to Harry's precedent. Public perception played a crucial role in shaping Tindall's early tenure. Initial responses ranged from supportive to critical. Sports enthusiasts praised his track record as a rugby player, highlighting his team-oriented mindset, resilience, and history of public engagement. His charity work, particularly initiatives supporting youth and sports development, offered further evidence of his capability to lead a high-profile organization. However, some critics questioned whether athletic experience alone could substitute for the deeply personal empathy and international recognition that Harry had brought to the Games. Pundits highlighted that while Tindall possessed technical expertise, the relational aspect, building trust with participants, understanding their challenges, and advocating on their behalf, would require time and adaptability. Tindall's first public appearance as patron was a carefully choreographed event, designed to signal continuity while emphasizing a fresh approach. Media coverage focused on body language, tone, and interaction with athletes. Observers noted his approachable demeanor, genuine interest in participants, and clear effort to understand their stories. This initial display helped mitigate some skepticism, demonstrating that Tindall recognized the significance of the Games beyond its ceremonial or competitive aspects. Yet, comparisons to Harry were inevitable. Every handshake, every conversation, every smile was scrutinized through a lens colored by Harry's prior engagement, reinforcing the dual challenge of establishing authority while respecting precedent. Inside the organization, Tindall faced operational and strategic hurdles. He inherited an established network of staff, volunteers, and stakeholders, each accustomed to Harry's management style. Operational processes, event planning, and logistical coordination had been tailored to accommodate Harry's approach, which combined hands-on involvement with delegation of strategic oversight. Tindall needed to assert leadership without disrupting the delicate balance, earning trust while making necessary adjustments to ensure efficiency and sustainability. This required both diplomacy and decisiveness, an intricate dance between honoring tradition and introducing innovation. Athletes themselves reacted with a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. Some veterans, deeply loyal to Harry, expressed initial concern about whether Tindall could provide the same level of personal attention and advocacy. Others saw potential for new energy and fresh perspectives, noting that Tindall's background as a professional athlete might bring insights into training, resilience, and competitive strategy. Early interactions, such as informal gatherings, training observations, and one-on-one conversations, revealed that Tindall was keenly aware of these dynamics, actively listening, asking questions, and seeking to understand the emotional and practical needs of the athletes. The media narrative surrounding Tindall's transition was multifaceted. Sports outlets emphasized his experience, highlighting rugby achievements, public speaking engagements, and previous charitable work. Royal commentators analyzed the implications of selecting a non-heir as patron, interpreting the move as a subtle signal of institutional recalibration, balancing royal prestige with operational effectiveness. Social media amplified these discussions, offering unfiltered reactions from fans, critics, and stakeholders worldwide. Memes, commentary threads, and debate forums proliferated, often juxtaposing Tindall's athletic accomplishments with Harry's global influence, fueling a continuous cycle of comparison and discourse. From a strategic perspective, Tindall needed to balance three primary objectives: maintaining the game's core mission, establishing credibility and authority, and differentiating his own leadership style. Maintaining the core mission involved ensuring that athletes remained at the center of all activities, that logistical execution upheld high standards, and that the game's international reputation was preserved. Establishing credibility required visible engagement, public communication, and demonstrable commitment to participants' welfare. Differentiation involved showcasing unique contributions, perhaps through innovations in athlete training programs, enhanced media coverage, or creative outreach initiatives that highlighted Tindall's strengths without undermining the legacy Harry had created. One of the most significant challenges Tindall faced was the emotional and symbolic weight attached to Harry's tenure. For many stakeholders, Harry had been more than a patron. He was a symbol of hope, understanding, and advocacy. Athletes often recounted personal stories where Harry's empathy had a transformative impact, from recognizing hidden struggles to advocating for mental health resources. These narratives formed a powerful part of the game's identity, creating high expectations for anyone stepping into the patron role. Tindall's task was not simply administrative. It was relational, requiring sensitivity, emotional intelligence, and the ability to honor established bonds while forging new ones. Tindall's public speeches reflected an acute awareness of this responsibility. In early addresses, he emphasized continuity, respect for the game's history, and a commitment to athlete well-being. He avoided overpromising, instead highlighting actionable steps and practical engagement. Analysts noted the careful balance between humility and authority, observing that his communication strategy sought to acknowledge the achievements of his predecessor while affirming his own capacity to contribute meaningfully. These speeches became benchmarks against which subsequent actions and appearances would be evaluated. The transition also illuminated broader societal questions about leadership, influence, and the role of symbolism in charitable work. Harry's prominence as a royal amplified his impact, providing media attention, fundraising capacity, and institutional leverage. Tindall, while respected, did not possess the same inherent platform, raising questions about how influence operates in contexts where visibility and recognition are integral to success. The scenario prompted reflection on whether operational expertise, relational engagement, or public profile carried greater weight in sustaining the mission of high-profile initiatives like the Invictus Games. Despite the challenges, Tindall's initial months indicated both potential and limitations. He cultivated relationships with new partners, engaged proactively with veteran communities, and implemented incremental improvements to event logistics and athlete support systems. Feedback from participants suggested cautious approval, with recognition of his approachable style and athletic insight. However, media coverage continued to frame narratives around Harry, underscoring the persistent comparison and highlighting the enduring emotional resonance of the former patron's legacy. Tindall's effectiveness, therefore, was measured not only by operational metrics, but by his ability to navigate the complex interplay of symbolism, expectation, and performance. By the end of the first year under Tindall's patronage, the Invictus Games had maintained operational continuity and public visibility, demonstrating the capacity for adaptation and resilience within the organization. Yet, underlying tensions remained. Comparisons to Harry persisted, athletes' loyalty to their former patron endured, and public opinion remained divided. Tindall had achieved a degree of stability and acceptance, but the narrative of transition, adaptation, and relational recalibration continued to shape perceptions. His tenure was both a test of leadership and a case study in managing legacy, expectations, and institutional continuity. The news that Prince Harry had been removed as patron of the Invictus Games and replaced by Mike Tindall sent shockwaves through the global media and social media platforms. Within hours, journalists, commentators, and royal watchers were dissecting the implications, while fans and critics alike flooded social media with opinions, memes, and theories. For Harry, the announcement was not merely a professional shift. It was a deeply personal and symbolic upheaval. As a man who had invested nearly a decade of his life into the Invictus Games, dedicating countless hours to veterans, planning, advocacy, and global promotion, being sidelined felt both sudden and profoundly alienating. Harry's initial public response was measured, yet it carried subtle undertones of frustration and disappointment. Through his official spokesperson, he issued a statement that thanked all the veterans, athletes, and supporters of the Games for their unwavering dedication. He emphasized the importance of the mission, reinforcing his commitment to supporting military personnel, mental health initiatives, and veterans' causes. However, beneath the polished phrasing, the statement conveyed an unmistakable sense of personal dismay, a recognition that while the mission itself remained vital, his personal role had been curtailed without consultation. The choice of words, while diplomatic, revealed an awareness of perceived injustice and a longing to maintain his identity as a champion of the Games. Media outlets quickly dissected Harry's statement, interpreting the subtle nuances as evidence of tension between the royal family and the former patron. Analysts noted that Harry's wording carefully avoided direct criticism of the monarchy or the decision-makers, yet it implied dissatisfaction with the process. Headlines ranged from sympathetic, highlighting Harry's decades-long commitment to the Games, to critical, suggesting that his increasingly public life outside the royal sphere had created a natural pivot point for leadership transition. The juxtaposition of praise and critique mirrored the broader media narrative surrounding Harry, which had long oscillated between admiration for his charitable work and scrutiny of his public behavior. Social media amplified the intensity of the response. Twitter threads, Instagram stories, and Facebook posts erupted with speculation, debate, and personal opinions. Fans expressed outrage, feeling that Harry's dedication had been unfairly disregarded. Many highlighted the personal risks and emotional investment Harry had undertaken to establish the Games, particularly his advocacy for injured and disabled veterans. Memes circulated depicting Harry in contrast with Tindall, often emphasizing the former patron's perceived emotional connection with participants and global audience reach. Some commentators suggested that the decision represented a broader pattern of institutional sidelining, framing the narrative as a clash between personal passion and organizational politics. Other social media voices criticized Harry, questioning whether his public image, media engagements, and outspoken behavior had contributed to the decision. These critics pointed to Harry's high-profile interviews, documentaries, and public statements on sensitive topics, arguing that such visibility, while raising awareness for social causes, could have strained relationships with governing bodies or influenced perceptions of his suitability as a patron. Discussions on Reddit, fan forums, and comment sections demonstrated a deeply divided public, with fervent supporters clashing with skeptics in heated debates that mirrored the polarized reception of Harry's broader public persona. Behind the scenes, private conversations revealed another dimension of the unfolding drama. Close friends, aides, and former colleagues described Harry as grappling with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and sadness. Sources indicated that he initially struggled to comprehend the rationale behind his removal, questioning the timing, communication, and decision-making process. Private discussions with confidants highlighted the emotional toll of suddenly being excluded from a role that had defined a significant portion of his adult life. For Harry, the patronage was more than a ceremonial title. It was a platform for advocacy, a channel for empathy, and a symbol of his personal identity and purpose within the veteran community. Harry reportedly reached out to several senior contacts within the Games organization, seeking clarity on the decision and expressing his willingness to continue supporting the mission in an advisory or consultative capacity. These conversations, while diplomatic, were tinged with frustration. Sources described Harry emphasizing his long-term investment, the relationships he had cultivated with athletes, and his unique understanding of the psychological and physical challenges faced by veterans. The responses he received, according to insiders, were professional yet firm, reiterating the decision to transition patronage to Tindall, citing organizational priorities, public perception, and strategic considerations as key factors. The dynamic between public statements and private emotions created a complex interplay. Harry's careful handling of public communication contrasted with the raw intensity of his private reactions. Observers noted that this duality is characteristic of individuals navigating high-profile transitions, where personal identity, public perception, and organizational decisions intersect. Harry's strategy seemed aimed at maintaining dignity and professionalism while subtly signaling the emotional impact of the decision. This approach allowed him to preserve credibility, demonstrate continued commitment to veterans, and control the narrative without engaging in overt conflict with the royal family or the Invictus Games administration. Media coverage extended to international outlets, reflecting Harry's global visibility and the cross-cultural interest in royal affairs. Newspapers, television broadcasts, and online publications highlighted the symbolism of Tindall's appointment, contrasting it with Harry's departure. Commentators analyzed how the change might influence athlete engagement, fundraising, and media attention. In particular, experts noted that Harry's established rapport with international media had been instrumental in promoting the Games worldwide, raising awareness of veteran issues, and generating substantial donations. Tindall's entry represented a recalibration of that dynamic, emphasizing operational expertise and athletic insight over media-driven global visibility. Analysts also discussed potential long-term implications for Harry's public image. While the immediate reaction focused on personal and organizational ramifications, broader considerations emerged regarding reputation management, media strategy, and advocacy effectiveness. Harry's supporters framed his removal as unjust, arguing that his dedication and personal connection to participants warranted continued leadership. Conversely, critics suggested that the transition reflected strategic institutional management, emphasizing the need for continuity, sustainability, and broader stakeholder alignment. The narrative became a touchstone for discussions about leadership, influence, and the intersection of personal passion with organizational authority. Social media, in particular, provided a platform for athletes and veterans themselves to share reactions. Some participants posted heartfelt messages thanking Harry for his dedication, highlighting moments where his empathy and understanding had directly impacted their recovery, confidence, and personal growth. These testimonies reinforced the emotional resonance of his patronage, reminding the public that leadership in such contexts extends beyond titles and ceremonial roles. It is built upon trust, visibility, and authentic engagement with the community served. Meanwhile, Tindall's emerging presence as patron was inevitably juxtaposed with these reflections, creating a narrative of continuity and transition. Observers noted that Harry's public response, tempered and professional, positioned him as a dignified figure despite personal disappointment. His careful navigation of media statements, combined with private expressions of frustration, revealed an individual attempting to balance emotional authenticity with strategic communication. This duality underscored the complexities inherent in high-profile transitions, where personal identity, legacy. Royal commentators speculated on the broader context, suggesting that Harry's removal could signal subtle shifts in the monarchy's approach to public engagement, charitable involvement, and the management of high-profile personalities. By appointing Tindall, the royal family seemed to prioritize operational stability, media neutrality, and the integration of professional athletic insight into the games. Harry's global prominence, while advantageous for visibility and advocacy, also carried unpredictability and intense media scrutiny, factors that may have influenced institutional decision-making. Throughout this period, Harry remained deeply committed to his broader advocacy efforts, emphasizing mental health, veteran support, and charitable engagement across multiple platforms. While the loss of patronage represented a significant personal and symbolic setback, it did not diminish his dedication to these causes. Sources described Harry redirecting his energy toward new initiatives, collaborating with international organizations, and leveraging media appearances to sustain attention on veteran challenges. This proactive stance reflected both resilience and strategic foresight, signaling that while one chapter had closed, the overarching mission remained central to his identity and purpose. Private conversations also revealed that Harry contemplated public appearances, interviews, and written statements to articulate his perspective further. Advisors recommended careful calibration, emphasizing the need to balance transparency, emotional authenticity, and professional discretion. The potential for misinterpretation, media sensationalism, and public polarization necessitated strategic communication planning. Ultimately, Harry's approach combined measured public statements with behind-the-scenes advocacy, maintaining visibility and influence while avoiding overt conflict with the game's organizational leadership or the royal family. By navigating these complex dynamics, Harry demonstrated an acute awareness of the interplay between public perception, personal identity, and institutional authority. His response, comprising carefully crafted statements, private outreach, and continued advocacy, illustrated the challenges of maintaining influence and authenticity in the wake of a significant role transition. Analysts noted that this episode would likely serve as a case study in leadership, crisis management, and the navigation of high-profile organizational change, highlighting the human dimensions of public service, emotional investment, and institutional realignment. The announcement that Prince Harry had been removed as patron of the Invictus Games and replaced by Mike Tindall ignited a storm of reactions, not only from the media and royal commentators, but more importantly, from the veterans, participants, and the general public who had closely followed Harry's dedication to the games over the years. For many veterans, Harry had been more than a ceremonial figure. He had been a symbol of advocacy, empathy, and understanding. His personal commitment to their struggles, from physical rehabilitation to mental health challenges, had built a bridge between the military community and public awareness, creating an enduring sense of trust. Among the veteran community, reactions ranged from shock to outrage. Many participants voiced their disbelief that the transition had occurred without any apparent consultation with Harry or the athletes themselves. Veterans who had developed close relationships with him over the years spoke openly about feeling as though a trusted ally had been taken away. Personal anecdotes poured in, recounting moments when Harry had personally visited hospitals, trained alongside recovering soldiers, or attended intensive therapy sessions to encourage morale and demonstrate solidarity. These stories, shared across social media platforms, interviews, and veteran-focused publications, emphasize the depth of Harry's engagement and the personal impact of his presence. In private forums and support groups, veterans expressed a mixture of disappointment and concern about the future of the Games under new leadership. Questions circulated about whether Tindall would bring the same level of personal commitment and understanding of the unique psychological challenges faced by wounded servicemen and women. While Mike Tindall's athletic credentials and experience as an international rugby player were unquestionable, many veterans wondered whether his approach would match Harry's blend of empathy, visibility, and advocacy. Discussions often centered on the potential for changes in event culture, media strategy, and athlete engagement, reflecting a deep awareness that leadership transitions could have real consequences on participant morale and public perception. Simultaneously, supportive voices acknowledged the inevitability of organizational transitions and the necessity of planning for succession. Some veterans expressed optimism that Tindall, with his professional sports background and public recognition, could bring a fresh perspective and renewed focus on competition, athletic achievement, and structured training programs. They argued that change, while difficult, could foster growth, expand outreach, and introduce innovative approaches to event management. This perspective highlighted a nuanced understanding within the veteran community. The role of patronage, while deeply personal, also intersected with institutional needs, operational priorities, and strategic planning. The broader public reaction reflected a complex mix of loyalty, criticism, and curiosity. Social media platforms were flooded with threads, posts, and hashtags that debated the fairness, rationale, and implications of Harry's removal. Supporters highlighted his unwavering dedication, his emotional investment, and the personal sacrifices he had made to elevate the visibility of the Invictus Games. Many framed the transition as an unjust decision, portraying it as a symbolic sidelining of someone who had become intrinsically linked with the identity and success of the Games. Memes, videos, and tributes circulated widely, reinforcing the narrative of Harry as a compassionate and committed advocate who had been treated unfairly. At the same time, critics questioned whether Harry's high-profile media presence and public commentary on sensitive topics might have contributed to the decision. Observers suggested that his outspoken nature, while raising awareness for charitable causes, sometimes created tension with established institutions or stakeholders. Debates emerged over whether the role of patron required a more neutral, operational focus, or if public visibility and personal charisma should remain central to the position. This divide highlighted the challenge of balancing personal advocacy with organizational governance, a tension that had become increasingly visible in Harry's public life over the past several years. Veteran-led organizations also weighed in on the matter, releasing statements that expressed gratitude for Harry's years of service while emphasizing the importance of continuity and effective leadership. These statements often walked a careful line, honoring Harry's contributions without openly criticizing the decision to appoint Tindall. Leaders underscored the ongoing mission of the Games, reaffirming their commitment to supporting wounded veterans, promoting rehabilitation through sport, and maintaining the public profile of the events. The messaging reflected both respect for Harry's personal investment and a recognition of the practical considerations inherent in organizational transitions. In addition to written statements, public events and interviews further illuminated veteran perspectives. Several former participants and medalists spoke candidly about their experiences with Harry, recounting moments of personal encouragement, emotional support, and hands-on involvement that had left lasting impressions. These narratives reinforced the notion that Harry's role had extended far beyond ceremonial duties. He had been a mentor, advocate, and visible supporter, whose presence had tangibly influenced the lives of participants. The accounts also highlighted the emotional dimension of his patronage, emphasizing that for many veterans, the relationship was deeply personal rather than strictly professional. Media outlets amplified these narratives, producing feature stories that combined athlete interviews, archival footage of Harry at previous games, and expert commentary on the broader implications of leadership change. Television segments highlighted the impact of Harry's involvement on public awareness, fundraising efforts, and international attention for the Games. Analysts noted that Harry's celebrity status had drawn unprecedented visibility to the challenges faced by veterans, helping to elevate discussions around physical rehabilitation, PTSD, and reintegration into civilian life. The transition to Tindall, while practical in some respects, was positioned as a symbolic shift with potential implications for public engagement and media coverage. Public forums and comment sections provided further insight into societal perceptions. While many praised Harry's commitment and expressed concern over his removal, others debated the broader question of patronage in high-profile charities. Was the position of patron primarily ceremonial, focused on public visibility, or was it about operational oversight and strategic governance? These debates highlighted the complexity of roles like Harry's, where personal identity, public perception, and institutional responsibilities intersect. Discussions often turned to the broader dynamics of the royal family, examining how public expectations, media scrutiny, and organizational priorities influence decisions about leadership and representation. Interestingly, reactions also extended to international audiences. In countries where Harry's advocacy had garnered significant attention, including the United States, Canada, and Australia, social media and news outlets covered the transition extensively. International commentators often framed the narrative through the lens of personal storytelling, emphasizing Harry's emotional connection to veterans and the global visibility he had provided for their experiences. These perspectives underscored the far-reaching implications of the patronage change, highlighting that Harry's influence extended well beyond the United Kingdom, shaping perceptions of veteran support, charitable engagement, and leadership on a global scale. Mike Tindall's appointment, meanwhile, generated its own spectrum of public opinion. Supporters praised his athletic expertise, public profile, and understanding of competitive sports, suggesting that his experience could enhance the technical and performance aspects of the Games. Critics, however, questioned whether Tindall could replicate Harry's personal empathy and emotional engagement with participants, emphasizing that leadership in this context involves more than athletic experience or public recognition. It requires a profound understanding of the human dimension of recovery, trauma, and resilience. The contrast between Harry and Tindall became a focal point in discussions, with many drawing comparisons in terms of personality, media presence, and approach to engagement. Harry's long-standing emotional investment, willingness to publicly discuss sensitive topics, and direct involvement with participants had created a personal legacy that was difficult to replicate. Tindall's professional credibility and athletic experience, while impressive, represented a different model of leadership, one more focused on operational oversight and sporting achievement than personal advocacy. These distinctions fueled public debate about the nature of effective leadership within high-profile charitable organizations, and whether visibility, empathy, or technical expertise should carry the greatest weight. Across social media, veteran communities, and media outlets, a recurring theme emerged: the tension between personal dedication and institutional decision-making. Many veterans and supporters argued that Harry's removal overlooked the value of personal relationships, emotional investment, and authenticity in leadership. Others highlighted the necessity of strategic planning, continuity, and organizational alignment in sustaining large-scale charitable initiatives. The resulting discourse revealed a multifaceted conversation, encompassing personal loyalty, public perception, institutional priorities, and the evolving expectations of high-profile patronage roles. Despite the divided opinions, one sentiment remained clear: Harry's impact on the Invictus Games had been profound and enduring. From the earliest iterations of the Games, he had championed the cause of wounded veterans, raised global awareness, and demonstrated a level of personal involvement that few patrons achieve. His removal, while controversial, did not erase the legacy he had built, nor did it diminish the relationships he had fostered with athletes, supporters, and international audiences. Veteran voices emphasized that the human element, The empathy, encouragement, and visibility Harry brought would be difficult to replace. Yet, many also expressed cautious optimism about the future, acknowledging Tindall's potential to bring new energy, athletic insight, and operational discipline to the role. The conversation underscored the duality of change. While transitions can provoke emotional and symbolic upheaval, they can also present opportunities for renewal, growth, and evolution within organizations. Public opinion polls conducted in the days following the announcement reflected this tension. A significant proportion of respondents expressed sympathy for Harry, highlighting his dedication and the perceived injustice of the timing and process. Another portion of the population emphasized pragmatic considerations, focusing on Tindall's credentials, the importance of organizational stability, and the broader mission of the Games. Social media analytics indicated high engagement levels, suggesting that the debate resonated deeply with a wide audience, encompassing not only royal watchers but also those invested in charitable work, veteran support, and leadership dynamics. In the immediate aftermath of the announcement, Buckingham Palace issued a brief but carefully worded statement regarding Prince Harry's removal as patron of the Invictus Games and the appointment of Mike Tindall as his replacement. The statement, which was released across official channels including the royal family's website and social media accounts, emphasized the importance of continuity and the ongoing mission of the Invictus Games. It acknowledged Harry's contributions over the years, noting his dedication, advocacy, and the personal connections he had fostered with veterans, athletes, and supporters around the world. The language of the statement was precise, diplomatic, and designed to minimize controversy while affirming the strategic rationale behind the transition. Phrases such as, "We are grateful for Prince Harry's tireless work," and "we are confident that Mike Tindall will bring valuable experience and fresh perspective to the role," were carefully chosen to balance acknowledgement of past contributions with an assertion of forward-looking organizational priorities. Royal insiders later revealed that the statement had been reviewed and approved at the highest levels, reflecting a coordinated effort to manage public perception and maintain institutional credibility. Media outlets responded immediately, dissecting the statement and analyzing both what it said and what it implied. Headlines varied in tone, reflecting a spectrum of interpretations. Some portrayed the transition as a pragmatic decision focused on operational needs, while others framed it as a symbolic sidelining of a high-profile royal who had become deeply associated with the Games. Leading newspapers ran feature articles examining Harry's tenure, highlighting his personal visits to hospitals, hands-on involvement with athletes, and advocacy for mental health support. Broadcast news segments juxtaposed archival footage of Harry interacting with veterans against current images of Tindall, inviting viewers to consider how the change might affect the culture and visibility of the Games. Royal commentators speculated on the underlying motivations for the decision. Some suggested that Harry's increasingly outspoken stance on political and social issues may have complicated his position as patron, particularly in light of the delicate balance between royal neutrality and public advocacy. Others argued that the move was part of a broader strategy to gradually shift Harry away from high-profile roles associated with the royal family, reflecting the long-standing tensions that had emerged over the past several years. Analysts noted that patronage of a major charity is often both a ceremonial and operational role, and any changes at this level inevitably invite public scrutiny, speculation, and debate. Social media amplified these interpretations, with journalists, commentators, and ordinary users sharing their own perspectives. On Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, posts ranged from tributes to Harry, recounting memorable moments from previous games, to supportive messages for Tindall, emphasizing his credentials as an accomplished athlete and public figure. Hashtags related to the announcement trended internationally, underscoring the global attention that Harry's role had attracted and the widespread interest in the transition. Opinion pieces in national and international media explored the implications of the move for both Harry and the Invictus Games. Many writers framed the story within a broader narrative of Harry's evolving public role, from his early military service to his advocacy work and subsequent departure from full-time royal duties. Articles highlighted his continued commitment to causes such as mental health, veteran welfare, and disability rights, suggesting that his removal as patron, while significant, did not diminish his influence or capacity to champion these issues independently. Some media outlets delved into Tindall's background, emphasizing his experience as an elite athlete, former captain of the England rugby team, and his public involvement in charitable initiatives. Analysts explored how his leadership style might differ from Harry's, speculating on potential changes in event management, athlete engagement, and media strategy. Comparisons between Harry's emotionally driven, hands-on approach and Tindall's performance-oriented, structured, model-dominated discussions, with experts weighing the merits and challenges of each. Press conferences and interviews with palace officials provided further insight into the decision-making process. Officials emphasized that the transition had been planned with long-term sustainability in mind, highlighting the importance of ensuring continuity, effective governance, and the ongoing success of the Games. While the language was diplomatic, it was clear that the palace sought to preempt criticism by framing the change as a positive step forward rather than a punitive measure. Observers noted that this approach reflected a broader strategy to balance transparency with discretion, acknowledging Harry's contributions while asserting institutional authority and control over high-profile appointments. Television coverage included extensive analysis of archival footage showing Harry's interactions with veterans, athletes, and spectators at previous games. Commentators highlighted moments of genuine connection, such as personal conversations with wounded servicemen, hands-on assistance during rehabilitation exercises, and public addresses emphasizing resilience, perseverance, and hope. The footage served to remind audiences of the emotional and human impact of Harry's patronage, reinforcing the sense of personal investment and the challenge of filling the void left by his departure. International media coverage expanded the narrative beyond the United Kingdom, framing the transition as both a royal development and a story with global implications. Outlets in North America, Europe, and Australia examined the announcement within the context of Harry's ongoing international influence, his advocacy work, and his complex relationship with the royal family. Analysts explored the symbolic nature of the transition, considering how it might reflect broader shifts in Harry's role, the monarchy's public strategy, and the perception of royal patronage in the modern era. In addition to traditional media, digital platforms played a crucial role in shaping public perception. YouTube channels, podcasts, and social media commentators produced content analyzing the decision, speculating on palace motives, and exploring potential consequences for the Invictus Games. Videos juxtaposed past achievements with the uncertainties of the future, while podcasters invited guests, including veterans, royal analysts, and former participants, to share insights and reactions. These discussions highlighted the multifaceted nature of the story, engaging audiences in a dialogue that extended far beyond the initial announcement. Royal historians provided additional context, situating Harry's tenure as patron within a broader historical framework. They noted that royal patronage of charitable organizations has long involved a combination of ceremonial duties, personal engagement, and public visibility. While some patrons focus primarily on fundraising or advocacy, others take a hands-on approach, cultivating personal relationships and influencing programmatic decisions. Harry's involvement was characterized as unusually immersive and personal, creating a unique model of patronage that combined celebrity influence, empathy, and lived experience as a former serviceman. The palace's statement also sparked debate about institutional strategy and public relations. Media analysts explored how the announcement had been timed, the phrasing used in the statement, and the potential impact on public perception of both Harry and the monarchy. Some suggested that the careful wording and measured tone were designed to mitigate controversy, acknowledging Harry's contributions while emphasizing the organization's forward-looking goals. Others interpreted the statement as a subtle assertion of authority, signaling that the royal family retained control over high-profile roles and strategic decisions, regardless of public sentiment or individual prominence. In the days following the statement, public discourse remained highly engaged, with coverage extending to radio talk shows, opinion columns, and online forums. Discussions often focused on the balance between personal legacy and institutional priorities, questioning whether emotional investment, public visibility, or organizational strategy should carry the greatest weight in decisions about leadership roles. The conversation reflected a deep engagement with the underlying themes of loyalty, influence, and the interplay between individual contribution and institutional governance. Amid the intense media scrutiny, palace officials emphasized their continued commitment to the mission of the Invictus Games. They highlighted ongoing initiatives aimed at supporting wounded veterans, fostering rehabilitation through sport, and promoting public awareness of the challenges faced by service personnel. The messaging reinforced the idea that while patrons may change, the game's underlying purpose remained unchanged, ensuring continuity for athletes, participants, and supporters alike. By framing the transition as both an acknowledgement of past contributions and a step toward long-term sustainability, the palace sought to manage public perception while maintaining institutional authority. The careful balance between recognition, reassurance, and forward-looking strategy reflected a sophisticated approach to communication, designed to honor Harry's legacy, introduce Tindall's new role, and maintain confidence in the organization's ongoing mission. As media coverage continued to unfold, it became clear that the story was not merely about a leadership change. It represented a convergence of personal legacy, public perception, institutional strategy, and global interest. From the perspective of journalists, commentators, and analysts, the announcement offered a rich case study in leadership transition, celebrity influence, and the complex dynamics of high-profile charitable organizations. The story resonated deeply because it combined elements of human emotion, strategic decision-making, and public intrigue, engaging audiences on multiple levels and ensuring that discussions would continue long after the initial statement had been released. The moment the news broke that Prince Harry had been removed as patron of the Invictus Games, insiders noted a flurry of activity behind the scenes. Sources close to the Duke of Sussex described a man grappling with a mixture of shock, anger, and profound disappointment. While the palace's official statement had been diplomatic and carefully worded, the personal impact on Harry was immediate and visceral. Unlike the structured and ceremonial communication of Buckingham Palace, Harry's response was raw, personal, and reflective of his years of emotional investment in the games and in the individuals he had met along the way. Within hours, Harry's communications team prepared a public response, crafted to reflect both his deep respect for the Invictus Games and his personal dismay at the decision. In a statement released on his official social media channels, Harry expressed gratitude to the veterans, athletes, and volunteers who had made the games a success and acknowledged the profound privilege of serving as patron over the years. The tone was measured but unmistakably heartfelt, capturing the tension between professional diplomacy and personal frustration. In his statement, Harry highlighted the transformative power of the Invictus Games, describing the athletes' journeys with vivid detail and genuine empathy. He recounted moments that had left an indelible mark on him. The raw courage of wounded servicemen learning to navigate prosthetic limbs, the determination of veterans overcoming physical and psychological challenges, and the sheer resilience of individuals who had faced unimaginable hardship yet found hope through sport. These anecdotes were more than rhetorical flourishes. They were the core of Harry's personal connection to the games and his justification for feeling a deep sense of loss at being removed from the role. Media outlets seized upon the statement, noting the contrast between the palace's measured diplomacy and Harry's emotive, almost unfiltered response. Analysts observed that Harry had carefully avoided any direct criticism of the royal family, while simultaneously conveying a sense of injustice and frustration. This delicate balance reflected Harry's nuanced approach to public communication, acknowledging institutional authority while asserting personal integrity and emotional truth. Observers remarked that such statements are rare, especially from royals who are typically expected to maintain a facade of composure and neutrality, highlighting the unique circumstances surrounding Harry's situation. Beyond the official statement, sources reported that Harry engaged in a series of private conversations with close friends, advisors, and former military colleagues. These discussions were described as intense, candid, and sometimes confrontational, as Harry sought to process the decision and its implications. He questioned the rationale behind the move, expressing disbelief that his years of personal involvement and advocacy could be overlooked or replaced so abruptly. In these private exchanges, Harry reportedly wrestled with questions of loyalty, identity, and the complex dynamics of his ongoing relationship with the royal institution. Social media reactions to Harry's personal statement were immediate and widespread. Fans, veterans, and public figures praised his sincerity and dedication, sharing stories of how his involvement had positively impacted their lives. Many expressed outrage at the decision, framing it as a slight not only against Harry but against the values of service, commitment, and personal sacrifice that the Games embody. Hashtags supporting Harry's legacy as patron trended internationally, illustrating the deep resonance of his personal response and the emotional connection that the public had with his role. Interviews with former participants in the Invictus Games provided additional context, emphasizing the human impact of Harry's patronage. Athletes spoke of his unwavering attention to their needs, his willingness to engage personally with their rehabilitation journeys, and his ability to create an environment of trust, encouragement, and camaraderie. These testimonials reinforced the sense that Harry's removal was not merely a ceremonial change, but a disruption to a network of relationships built on genuine empathy and shared experience. Harry's statement also included subtle reflections on the broader challenges of balancing personal values with institutional expectations. While he refrained from directly criticizing the palace, he alluded to the tensions that arise when individual passion intersects with organizational protocol. Analysts noted that this was a strategic choice. Harry could convey his sense of injustice without alienating supporters or appearing reckless. It demonstrated his understanding of public perception, media dynamics, and the importance of framing personal disappointment within a narrative that emphasized service, empathy, and commitment. In addition to written statements, Harry participated in several media interviews, though these were tightly controlled and pre-approved. During these appearances, he expanded upon his statement, offering insights into his emotional connection with the Games and the athletes. He recounted specific events that had shaped his understanding of resilience, vulnerability, and the human capacity for growth. His storytelling was compelling, drawing viewers into the lived experiences of participants while reinforcing his personal investment in the Games' mission. These interviews highlighted Harry's ability to communicate authentically, balancing emotional depth with the careful consideration required in public engagements. The tone of Harry's response underscored the complex intersection of personal identity, public duty, and institutional authority. For Harry, the Invictus Games were more than a patronage role. They represented a platform for advocacy, a space for meaningful engagement, and a reflection of his personal values. Being removed from this role, therefore, carried emotional weight far beyond the ceremonial aspects of the title. Experts in royal affairs suggested that Harry's reaction could be seen as part of a broader pattern in which he asserts his independence while navigating the constraints of royal protocol. This tension, they noted, is emblematic of the challenges faced by high-profile public figures seeking to maintain personal authenticity in the face of institutional expectations. The public's response to Harry's personal statements was polarized. While many lauded his candidness and dedication, some commentators raised questions about the appropriateness of airing personal disappointment publicly. Critics argued that, as a member of the royal family, Harry had a responsibility to prioritize institutional cohesion over personal sentiment. Supporters countered that his engagement with the Games was deeply personal, grounded in lived experience and meaningful relationships, and that his response was a legitimate expression of human emotion in a situation that had profound personal consequences. In analyzing the impact of Harry's response, social psychologists and communication experts highlighted the role of narrative and emotional resonance. They noted that Harry's storytelling, grounded in real-life experiences and human vulnerability, created a powerful emotional connection with audiences. By sharing personal anecdotes and reflections, he was able to humanize the abstract notion of patronage, making the decision's consequences tangible and relatable. This approach, they suggested, exemplifies the effectiveness of narrative in shaping public perception, building empathy, and sustaining engagement in complex, emotionally charged situations. Beyond immediate reactions, Harry's statements sparked a broader conversation about the nature of royal patronage, personal legacy, and institutional authority. Commentators explored the ethical and strategic considerations involved in leadership transitions, emphasizing the delicate balance between honoring past contributions and ensuring organizational continuity. Harry's personal response, they noted, served as a catalyst for these discussions, highlighting the human dimensions of roles that are often perceived as purely ceremonial or symbolic. Insiders reported that Harry's personal response was also intended to reassure the athletes, veterans, and volunteers who had come to rely on his presence and advocacy. By expressing gratitude, reaffirming his commitment to their causes, and highlighting the enduring mission of the Invictus Games, Harry sought to provide continuity and emotional support even as his formal role shifted. This dual focus, acknowledging personal disappointment while sustaining the confidence of those he served, demonstrated both emotional intelligence and strategic awareness. In the days following the announcement, Harry continued to engage with the public through carefully curated communications. Social media posts, video messages, and interviews reinforced themes of resilience, empathy, and commitment, maintaining a sense of personal presence despite the formal transition. Analysts observed that this approach allowed Harry to retain influence, uphold his personal brand, and continue championing the causes he had long supported, even outside the official framework of royal patronage. Ultimately, Harry's personal response and public statements exemplified a nuanced negotiation between emotion, strategy, and public expectation. They revealed a man deeply invested in his role, grappling with the challenges of change, and determined to assert both his values and his voice. The combination of heartfelt storytelling, measured reflection, and public engagement ensured that his perspective was clearly communicated, leaving audiences with a vivid sense of his dedication, his disappointment, and the enduring significance of his contributions to the Invictus Games. The decision to remove Prince Harry as patron of the Invictus Games did not occur in isolation. It was the culmination of careful deliberation and counsel from senior members of the royal family and their closest advisors. Sources indicate that the atmosphere within Buckingham Palace following the announcement was a mixture of relief, concern, and careful strategizing, as the family sought to navigate the delicate political, emotional, and public relations implications of the move. The reaction from senior royals, in particular, was instructive, revealing both the internal dynamics of the institution and the complex balance between personal loyalty and institutional prerogative. King Charles, as the head of the monarchy, was reportedly central to the decision-making process. Insiders describe him as having approached the situation with the weight of historical precedent in mind, weighing the symbolic and practical aspects of patronage against the broader strategy of maintaining stability within the royal family. Advisors claim that Charles recognized the exceptional dedication Harry had shown to the Games, yet he was concerned about the potential for ongoing tension between Harry and other family members if the formal title remained in place. Analysts noted that Charles's approach reflected a combination of pragmatism and caution. He understood the importance of continuity for the Invictus Games while simultaneously prioritizing the long-term cohesion of the monarchy. Queen Camilla's reaction was reportedly measured but firm. Sources close to the Queen noted that she expressed empathy for Harry's contributions and acknowledged the personal disappointment he would feel, but she supported the decision as necessary for the unity and public image of the royal family. Observers of Camilla's role emphasized her focus on institutional stability, suggesting that she prioritized maintaining the appearance of orderly succession and the careful management of royal titles over individual sentiment. Her approach, characterized by composure and strategic consideration, reflected her long-standing understanding of palace protocol and the delicate art of balancing personal relationships with institutional responsibilities. Princess Anne, known for her forthrightness and no-nonsense attitude, reportedly took a more candid stance. Sources claim that Anne was vocal in her support for maintaining the integrity of the Invictus Games while expressing concern about the potential fallout from Harry's removal. Advisors indicate that Anne emphasized the importance of transparent communication, urging the family to anticipate public reaction and prepare contingency plans for managing media scrutiny. Her reaction underscores her reputation as a pragmatic, action-oriented royal, willing to confront difficult truths and ensure that both the organization and the family are prepared for challenges that arise from high-profile decisions. Prince William, on the other hand, reportedly experienced a complex range of emotions. While publicly supportive of the institutional decision, William is said to have privately struggled with the familial and emotional dimensions of removing his brother from a role to which he had devoted so much personal energy. Sources describe William as feeling a mix of empathy for Harry's disappointment and responsibility to the institution, reflecting the intricate balance between personal loyalty and duty that often defines the monarchy. Observers suggest that William's measured approach was designed to uphold the family's public unity while acknowledging the internal tensions that such decisions inevitably create. The palace advisors and senior courtiers played a critical role in managing the communication strategy surrounding Harry's removal. Insiders indicate that a team of experts in media relations, public perception, and crisis management were mobilized to craft official statements, coordinate with media outlets, and anticipate public reaction. These advisors reportedly emphasized framing the decision in a way that highlighted the continuity and stability of the Invictus Games while mitigating the perception of personal grievance. Analysts of royal communications noted that this approach reflects decades of experience in managing high-profile transitions, demonstrating the importance of narrative control in preserving both the institution's reputation and its internal cohesion. Several advisors reportedly recommended a careful sequencing of announcements to ensure that the public understood the rationale behind the decision without framing Harry as a target. Strategic timing was considered essential. Communications were coordinated with other royal engagements to minimize potential media conflation or sensationalism. Sources suggest that the palace also briefed allied organizations and stakeholders within the Invictus Games to prepare them for Harry's public response and ensure that the transition to Mike Tindall as patron would be smooth. This level of meticulous planning underscores the palace's awareness of the high stakes involved and the importance of minimizing disruption to both the organization and the monarchy. Internal discussions reportedly considered the broader public reaction, including potential backlash from veterans, athletes, and fans of Harry's work. Advisors are said to have debated the potential risks of negative perception and media scrutiny, recognizing that Harry's popularity and visibility could amplify public discourse in ways that might challenge the monarchy's narrative. In response, the palace reportedly emphasized the need for proactive engagement with stakeholders, clear messaging, and visible support for both the Invictus Games and the athletes, ensuring that the decision could be framed as a strategic adjustment rather than a personal rebuke. Several courtiers reportedly highlighted Harry's long-standing commitment to the Games as a factor requiring careful acknowledgement. Insiders suggest that discussions within the palace included proposals for symbolic gestures, public statements, or honorary recognitions that would honor Harry's contributions while allowing for the formal transition to Mike Tindall. The careful balancing of respect for personal achievements with the demands of institutional authority was a recurring theme in these internal deliberations, illustrating the complexity of managing high-profile roles within the royal family. Observers note that the involvement of Mike Tindall as the new patron was a strategic choice designed to maintain continuity while signaling a generational and relational adjustment. Tindall's experience as a decorated athlete and his status as a senior member of the extended royal family made him a suitable figure to assume the role. Advisors reportedly emphasized that his appointment would allow the Invictus Games to continue uninterrupted while minimizing potential public perception of conflict. Sources indicate that careful consideration was given to Tindall's personal approach, his rapport with veterans, and his ability to sustain Harry's legacy while bringing his own energy and experience to the role. The internal reaction was not uniform. Sources indicate that some courtiers privately expressed concern about potential strain in familial relationships. They acknowledged the risk of public perception framing Harry as being sidelined or marginalized, which could exacerbate existing tensions and attract significant media scrutiny. Nonetheless, the majority of advisors reportedly concluded that the long-term stability and reputation of the monarchy required firm action, tempered by strategic communication and acknowledgement of Harry's contributions. Royal observers and analysts suggest that the reactions within the family and advisory network reflect a careful interplay of emotion, duty, and strategy. The decision to remove Harry as patron was not only a formal reassignment, but also a management of perception, relationships, and institutional continuity. The deliberations reportedly involved weighing Harry's personal investment and emotional response against the broader objectives of the monarchy and the operational needs of the Invictus Games, resulting in a decision that balanced compassion, pragmatism, and institutional foresight. Even beyond the palace walls, the reactions of senior advisors demonstrate the meticulous care with which the royal family approaches transitions and high-profile changes. Each statement, briefing, and internal discussion was framed to maintain the dignity of the institution while mitigating risk. Analysts note that such precision reflects the cumulative experience of centuries of royal protocol, institutional memory, and a keen awareness of the role public perception plays in sustaining authority and legitimacy. In summary, the reaction from the royal family and advisors to Harry's removal as patron of the Invictus Games was a complex mixture of empathy, strategic calculation, and institutional priority. While there was recognition of the emotional impact on Harry, the overarching concern was the continuity of the games, the reputation of the monarchy, and the management of both internal and public relations. The interplay of personal sentiment, familial dynamics, and institutional responsibility underscores the intricate balancing act that defines the modern royal family, highlighting both the human dimension of high-profile roles and the enduring demands of public service. The announcement of Mike Tindall as the new patron of the Invictus Games marked a pivotal moment in the ongoing saga surrounding Prince Harry's removal. While the decision was made with careful deliberation within the royal family and their advisors, the public response added another layer of complexity to an already high-profile transition. Tindall, a former England rugby star and seasoned public figure, was seen as a stabilizing choice. Someone with the credibility, athletic experience, and royal connections to ensure continuity for an organization that had become closely associated with Harry's personal brand. Immediately following the official announcement, media outlets around the world began analyzing Tindall's suitability for the role. Many journalists highlighted his decorated career in sports, noting that his achievements on the rugby field demonstrated a level of discipline, leadership, and resilience that would translate effectively into the realm of the Invictus Games. Analysts emphasized that Tindall's hands-on experience with elite athletes, coupled with his familiarity with charitable work and public engagements, positioned him as a natural successor to Harry, even if he lacked the personal connection that Harry had cultivated over the years. Public reactions on social media were mixed, reflecting the emotional investment many fans had in Prince Harry's work. Some commentators praised the appointment, pointing out that Tindall's reputation for authenticity, humility, and dedication to sportsmanship would bring a fresh perspective to the games. Supporters noted that Tindall's previous involvement with military charities and his active engagement with community initiatives suggested he would be an effective ambassador for the organization. Mike has the experience and the heart for this role, one commentator wrote. He's not trying to overshadow Harry. He's stepping in to keep the games moving forward. Other members of the public, however, expressed disappointment and skepticism. Many felt that Harry's personal connection to the games, forged through his own military service and advocacy for veterans, could not be easily replaced. Critics questioned whether Tindall could maintain the same level of emotional resonance with the participants, many of whom had come to rely on Harry's empathetic leadership. Harry built this from the ground up, a veteran wrote online. It's not just a title. It's about understanding the pain, the recovery, the challenges. Can anyone else truly step into that? Veteran communities and Invictus Games participants also provided early feedback, some of it publicly, some behind the scenes. While initial reactions were cautious, there was recognition of Tindall's potential to contribute meaningfully. Insiders suggest that Tindall's immediate focus was on meeting with athletes, listening to their stories, and ensuring that the transition did not disrupt ongoing programs or morale. Observers noted that his approach appeared intentionally hands-on, reflecting an awareness that symbolic leadership alone would not suffice. He needed to demonstrate genuine engagement with the individuals and missions that define the games. The royal family's communications team worked closely with Tindall to craft his public messaging, emphasizing continuity, respect for Harry's legacy, and a forward-looking vision for the Invictus Games. Early statements from Tindall included expressions of gratitude for the trust placed in him and a commitment to uphold the principles and objectives that Harry had championed. Analysts of royal messaging noted the careful balance in Tindall's statements. He publicly acknowledged Harry's contributions while positioning himself as a capable steward of the organization, ready to ensure its ongoing success. Media outlets also highlighted the broader implications of Tindall's appointment. Commentators suggested that the move represented not just a personnel change, but a subtle recalibration of royal influence and public perception. By selecting someone closely connected to the family but distinct from Harry's immediate sphere, the monarchy reinforced its ability to manage transitions, assert institutional authority, and maintain stability in high-profile organizations. Observers noted that Tindall's appointment was strategically framed to signal continuity without confrontation, a careful messaging approach designed to minimize controversy while preserving the public image of the Games and the family. In addition to media analysis, public opinion polls conducted shortly after the announcement provided further insight into societal reception. Initial data suggested that a majority of respondents were cautiously optimistic, particularly those with interests in sports and veterans affairs. Respondents praised Tindall's athletic achievements, his approachable demeanor, and his reputation for humility. At the same time, polls revealed lingering emotional attachments to Harry, with many respondents expressing hope that the former prince would continue to play a supportive, if unofficial, role in the organization. Analysts interpreted these results as indicative of a broader tension between loyalty to individuals and confidence in institutional decisions, a dynamic that would likely influence public discourse in the weeks and months following the announcement. Tindall himself reportedly approached the role with a combination of respect, pragmatism, and humility. Sources close to him indicated that he was acutely aware of the symbolic weight carried by the position and the expectations surrounding Harry's legacy. He is said to have initiated a series of listening sessions with key stakeholders, including athletes, staff, and former organizers, to ensure that the transition would be as smooth as possible. Observers suggested that Tindall's proactive approach not only demonstrated leadership, but also helped to reassure both the public and the royal family that the Games would continue to thrive under his guidance. Social media narratives evolved rapidly in response to Tindall's public engagements. Positive coverage focused on his approachable nature, athletic insight, and authentic engagement with participants, while critical voices questioned whether he could replicate the passion and personal investment Harry had brought to the Games. Analysts noted that this duality of perception is common in transitions of high-profile roles, particularly when a figure with a strong emotional connection is replaced. Tindall's task, therefore, extended beyond operational leadership. He needed to navigate the complex landscape of public sentiment, media scrutiny, and institutional expectation. Experts in organizational transitions and leadership commented on the broader lessons from Tindall's appointment. They emphasized that continuity, credibility, and authenticity are key factors in maintaining trust during high-profile changes. Tindall's athletic background, his public persona, and his royal connections were identified as assets that could facilitate a successful transition. Observers also highlighted the importance of narrative framing, noting that Tindall's early statements, his visible engagement with participants, and the careful communication strategy orchestrated by the palace all contributed to shaping public perception and mitigating potential backlash. The appointment also sparked debates in broader cultural and social circles. Some commentators framed the transition as an example of generational shift within the royal family, while others focused on the dynamics of celebrity, public expectation, and institutional authority. Discussions ranged from detailed analyses of the monarchy's approach to succession in organizational roles, to more emotive commentary on loyalty, recognition, and the role of personal charisma in public service. Tindall's challenge was therefore not just operational, but also symbolic. He was stepping into a role laden with historical and emotional significance, requiring careful navigation of both tangible responsibilities and intangible perceptions. Overall, The public reception of Mike Tindall's appointment as patron of the Invictus Games reflects the complexity inherent in high-profile transitions. While there was recognition of his credentials and potential, there was also widespread awareness of the emotional and symbolic void left by Prince Harry's removal. Analysts, media commentators, and stakeholders alike emphasized the dual challenge of honoring past contributions while charting a new path forward. Tindall's early actions, public engagements, and the strategic support provided by the royal communications team suggest that the monarchy is intent on ensuring that the transition strengthens both the Invictus Games and the broader public perception of stability, continuity, and institutional resilience. In conclusion, Tindall's appointment is both a practical and symbolic maneuver. It underscores the monarchy's ability to manage transitions effectively while navigating public sentiment, media scrutiny, and internal family dynamics. The early reception, while mixed, demonstrates cautious optimism and highlights the importance of credibility, authenticity, and visible engagement in sustaining public trust. Tindall's ongoing challenge will be to honor Harry's legacy, engage meaningfully with participants, and project a sense of continuity that reassures both the public and the royal family that the Invictus Games remain in capable hands. The moment the news broke that Prince Harry had been removed as patron of the Invictus Games and replaced by Mike Tindall, media outlets around the globe erupted in a flurry of coverage. Newspapers, television networks, online news platforms, and social media channels all sought to capture the story from every angle, with commentary ranging from analytical to sensational. The sheer volume of coverage underscored the high stakes involved in this transition, not only for Harry personally, but also for the reputation of the royal family and the future of the Invictus Games. In traditional media, headlines ranged from neutral reportage to emotionally charged framing. Major British newspapers led with straightforward statements. Prince Harry steps down from Invictus Games role, or Mike Tindall named new patron of Invictus Games. Yet even these seemingly neutral headlines carried subtext, implying a sudden, possibly controversial, shift. Tabloids and online outlets were less restrained, with headlines designed to provoke curiosity and debate. Harry cut loose from Invictus Games, royal family makes bold move, or Mike Tindall takes over, leaving Harry out in the cold. The variety of coverage highlighted the duality of public perception. Some viewed it as an organizational necessity, while others perceived it as a dramatic personal and familial conflict. Television coverage followed a similar pattern. Evening news programs dedicated substantial airtime to the story, often including expert panels composed of royal commentators, journalists specializing in military affairs, and public relations analysts. Panel discussions explored multiple facets of the situation: the procedural reasons behind the change, Tindall's qualifications, Harry's reaction, and the broader implications for the monarchy's public image. Analysts highlighted that the Invictus Games were more than a charitable event. They were a symbol of Harry's post-military identity and public purpose. Removing him from such a role, even with an equally qualified successor, therefore carried significant symbolic weight. Social media, as expected, became a lightning rod for public sentiment. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook feeds were flooded with opinions, memes, and debates within hours of the announcement. Supporters of Harry expressed outrage, framing the move as a punitive measure by the royal family. "They're punishing Harry for leaving the family," one user wrote. Others praised the decision, citing Tindall's credentials and the need for continuity in leadership. "Mike is experienced, grounded, and perfect for this. The Games will continue to thrive." The split in sentiment revealed a deeply polarized audience, reflecting larger debates about the monarchy's modern relevance, celebrity culture, and the personal versus institutional responsibilities of public figures. Experts in media and communications were quick to weigh in on the implications of this coverage. Some suggested that the framing of Harry's removal as a personal conflict rather than an organizational decision risked overshadowing the mission of the Invictus Games itself. They argued that the intense focus on royal drama could detract from the stories of the athletes, veterans, and communities who benefit most from the Games. Others contended that media scrutiny was inevitable given Harry's high-profile status, and that the family and Tindall would need to carefully manage messaging to ensure that the organization's work remained at the forefront. In addition to commentary on Harry and Tindall, media outlets explored the broader cultural and political implications. Some journalists noted that the story touches on questions of accountability and authority within the monarchy. By asserting control over a high-profile charitable organization, the royal family signaled its capacity to shape narratives and make decisions independently of individual members' preferences. Analysts pointed out that while Harry's emotional investment had been central to the game's identity, Tindall's appointment allowed the institution to reassert its influence and demonstrate organizational resilience. Editorial pieces and op-eds also flourished, offering nuanced interpretations of the situation. Some commentators emphasized the human dimension, noting the emotional toll on Harry and the potential impact on his personal and public relationships. Others focused on strategic considerations, praising the monarchy for selecting a figure with established credibility and strong public appeal. Throughout these analyses, there was a consistent recognition that the Invictus Games are both a personal passion project for Harry and a high-profile public institution, and that changes in leadership inevitably carry both operational and symbolic consequences. Public debate extended into community forums and veteran networks. Many veterans who had participated in previous Invictus Games weighed in, expressing mixed feelings. While there was respect for Tindall's athletic accomplishments and understanding of team dynamics, there was also acknowledgement of the emotional connection Harry had cultivated with participants. Several veterans noted that Harry's military